Hi, I'm Angela Fair. As a watercolor instructor, I've spent a lot of years telling students how to paint in watercolor, and generally that involves giving them a few guidelines to follow. Rules can be really helpful when you're first getting started in painting because they give you guidelines, they give you a framework to follow and some structure that will help you be more successful in those first early paintings. Some of the rules that I learned as a new painter and that I often teach to my beginning students are that we try to work with transparent colors in watercolor. We don't use white or black. I encourage students to start with a limited palette, a small range of colors, and learn how to mix their colors from that small range. We talk about how to handle your paper and whether or not to stretch your paper. As new watercolor painters, we make a goal not to overwork our paintings, not to fuss them into disturbing the paper fibers and making our watercolor painting look flat and fussed over. We want to keep a fresh look. Rules are great when they provide structure, when they help you to take some shortcuts and maybe not learn things the hard way all the time. You can go straight to using your watercolor the way it was intended to be used, and really the way that it often looks best. However, rules can also, over time, start to feel like limitations. They can start to hold you back from really finding your voice as an artist. And I really wanted to talk about that today because there were certain rules that I followed in the beginning that started to make me feel critical of my own growth and down on myself that I wasn't going to be able to become the artist I wanted to be because I wasn't able to follow those rules. One rule that I really struggled with was the many times that I heard artists say that you should never work from photographs, that a painting that was created from a photograph had a dead feeling, you should always work from life. And I live in a northern climate. We have winter 7 months of the year and 3 more months where it's a lot of the time too cold to sit still outside. We try to keep moving in the north so we don't freeze to death. And so I didn't want to freeze my buns off in order to make a good painting. That wasn't something that I could do. And so I had to work from photographs. And I felt bad about it. I thought, clearly I'm never going to be the artist that, these artists are because they talk so much about how important it is to work from life. Another rule that held me back and made me feel bad about my own art journey was the rule that says that you need to know how to draw in order to paint. And I don't like to draw. Pencils are not comfortable in my hands. I feel like my line work is clunky. I erase too much. My drawings just look flat. I want to get right to painting, and I felt really bad about that for a very long time. And when you're feeling guilty about your journey as an artist, it makes it very hard to grow. Often you might avoid painting because you're discouraged, because you feel like you don't have what it takes, because you're busy breaking the rules, or you can't follow those rules. So over the years, I started breaking rules. I started to, say, oh yeah, I know I shouldn't use white and black, but what if I did? My video sponsor today is Nicholson's Peerless Transparent Watercolor Sheets. Let me show you a little bit about this fun portable solution for painting anywhere you go. These dye-based watercolors are made to be portable. Paint sublimated onto cardstock, something that you can slip in your pocket and take with you sketching. Peerless watercolors have been around since 1902. They were originally used for tinting and hand coloring photographs, and so they were made to be transparent so that the original photograph would always show through. You can use Peerless watercolors straight from the book, or another way to make them portable and useful for you is to cut small pieces that you can use as a mini palette. I've been using them for plein air painting, painting on the go with my portable plein air watercolor kit. I love that I can bring a water brush and my Peerless watercolors and any sketchbook of my choice and create quick sketches on the go. I like to think of my plein air painting as mental notes for future paintings. This is a way of taking notes on what you see, starting to plan for the future painting in the studio. Use the link in the description to find out more about Peerless watercolors and order your own set. So over the years, I started breaking rules. I started to, say, oh yeah, I know I shouldn't use white and black, but what if I did? What if I tried it? And what if I made my art journey something that worked for me? And then I started to notice that even though I didn't know how to draw, my drawing skills or my observation skills and my ability to accurately paint what I was seeing was improving without me needing to pick up a pencil. And I realized that having the ability to draw didn't necessarily mean doing pencil sketches and all of that work. I could learn how to draw by working as an artist with a brush. And that was really powerful and transformative for me. It helped me to see that just because an artist is saying, this is the thing you should do, they're sharing what's worked for them, and they've found a way to make it work for them. And I could do the same with the rules I was hearing. I could recognize that maybe they had value for my artistic process, but if my artistic process was different than that, that was okay too. The best part of being an artist is simply the fact that I can do whatever I want. When I am painting, I'm holding the paintbrush, I'm the one in control. If there's rules to follow, I get to make them and decide whether or not to abide by them. I have met so many different artists over the years with different approaches to creating and different styles, and the vast diversity and the fact that there needs to be a diversity in art in order for art to be art means that we get to break rules. We get to find what works for us so that we can make unique stuff. So for me, rule number one for art is do whatever makes you feel the most satisfied. What fits your watercolor journey, what molds itself to your approach as an artist, what feels exciting to you and right for that moment. Do that thing, and that's what makes your art art. Number two, one of my students asked me recently how much of my art is influenced by other people's expectations. And my immediate thought in response to that was none of it. I get to apply paint to paper for the pure joy of painting. And when other people are dictating how I should do that, it just takes a little bit of that joy away. Years ago, and this was really transformative to my watercolor journey. Years ago, I was working on a watercolor painting. I was actually painting in a local mall, which it sounds exciting, except for the mall gets almost no traffic. So it was pretty quiet that day. And even so, I'm putting the first layer down on a forest floor scene. And as I'm painting, that first layer went down so beautifully. And I remember looking at it and thinking, I just wish I could call this painting finished just the way it is. But nobody would understand it. And I went ahead and started to add that second layer of paint and overworked the painting. It didn't have the same magic that it had in that first layer. And there's this sense of loss. My desire to please others robbed me of my ability to have peace with where my work was at and to just celebrate that beautiful moment in the painting. It pushed me to move on to try to please this invisible audience rather than pleasing myself. I've learned now that I can trust my viewers to connect to my work when it best expresses who I am. And so I need to let myself be my first judge, my first guide, my biggest evaluator of my work needs to be me. Do I have a goal for the work? Does it resonate for me? Does it feel like an authentic expression of who I am? Those are the standards I need to follow. People don't always agree with this. This idea of not listening to others when it comes to your work, doing what makes you feel the most satisfied. But I really do feel like feedback should play a very small role in determining whether or not our artwork is successful. When you listen to others, they can only share from their outside experience, their opinions, their background and knowledge. And if they're famous art, even if they're famous art critics, unless they know you personally, they're not going to necessarily recognize the you in your art. They can evaluate your work based on technical merit, and technical merit does have its place, but when art is a form of communication, of you needing to speak your truth, then we need to recognize that not everyone's going to recognize that truth in your work, and allow space for that. Now, if you're a beginner painter, you're going to see that there's a disconnect between what you want to happen on the paper and what actually happens. You have a vision, but you may not have the technical skill to carry it off. And that's okay. skill and technique is created through brush miles, through hours of practice and learning to understand the reaction of paint and water on the paper. It's something that is, kind of a motor skill thing. It can be developed over time. Some of us learn to understand it, I think, a little faster than others. I often feel like I'm not the fastest learner when it comes to these techniques, but I am determined to be the most stubborn, and I let that carry me through. And next thing you know, I'm 25 years in and I know pretty much a lot about watercolor. Not everything. I'm going to be a student of watercolor for the rest of my life. But what has driven me through is recognizing that my paintings do not have to be 100% perfect all of the time. In fact, they're never 100% perfect. And if I'm looking for 100% on my painting as the score for a successful painting, I'm going to be disappointed 100% of the time. What I've learned instead is when I'm evaluating a painting, I look for just the small parts of the painting that are successful. When I was first painting, maybe it was one brush stroke. And then maybe it became 5%, and then 10% of the painting started to work. And then next thing I knew, I had 20%. And that 20% that works in that painting, then I do another painting and 20% of that painting works. And if I'm adding those percentages up, that adds up to 100% pretty fast. So then I could say that maybe it only takes 5 paintings to be 100% successful. I want my success to be cumulative rather than based on any individual painting. Thinking of it this way helps me to evaluate growth in my work. It motivates me to paint more often. I can see that my skills are growing by seeing those successful portions of the painting continue. And I can apply what I'm learning in one painting, that 20% that works, and bring it over into the next painting so that maybe in the next painting I get 21% working together. I look for that. I look to build on my strengths. However small those strengths happen to be, they will grow as I keep painting and stay encouraged. So I really make a big goal just to recognize that I'm not going to paint a perfect painting, that my success is accumulated by degrees, and encouraging myself to look for those signs of growth. Finally, learning watercolor is a self-guided skill. It doesn't matter how many teachers you have or how many YouTube videos you've watched. At the end of the day, you decide how you're going to apply what you've learned, when you're going to apply it, and how much time you're going to spend on that. You get to choose the path your learning takes. And whether it's academic, where you're going through a watercolor book and step-by-step learning technique, or whether you're much more intuitive and painting kind of stream of consciousness style, either way, you're growing your skills in your way. You can decide when to take a break from classes so that you can focus on implementing what you've been learning, and that's a really wise thing. It's so easy to binge watch YouTube channels and see a lot of great tutorials, but never actually sit down and apply that knowledge. So do take the time to step back, just get into that quiet space with yourself and apply what you've learned. You can train yourself to be alert to your weak areas, to bad habits, things that you avoid doing because they feel hard, and you can structure your learning to address those weaknesses. You can and you should be looking for unhealthy thought patterns as well. The things that hold you back and make you feel discouraged or afraid, those are things that you can train yourself to view in different ways, to see your obstacles as the very things that make you unique as an artist. That can be a really powerful and encouraging thing. You can choose what direction your learning will take as you seek to grow new skills. As a watercolor instructor, I don't have all the answers. I'm not academic about paint colors and pigment numbers. I have learned everything I've learned by being self-taught and not a good academic. I kind of goof around in my way of learning. I spend time just playing and watching and observing the paint. I'm very much a practical painter in the approach that I take of just wanting my watercolor journey to be as fun as possible. And it's so cool that we have the internet with the opportunity to learn from so many different instructors. I love sharing watercolor instruction and encouraging students on my website at learn.angelafair.com. I love seeing your light bulb moments as You apply different watercolor techniques and see your skills grow. And when you have breakthroughs that help your paintings to be transformed to look more like the artist you were meant to be. That's one reason I just love teaching watercolor. I want you to feel encouraged and love this painting process because it's great creative therapy, and it gives us the chance to see the world through your eyes, which is just an amazing and profound and marvelous thing. Thanks for watching. If you're feeling restricted by rules and limitations today, set out and spend some time deliberately breaking those rules. If you've been holding back from using black because somebody told you it's a bad thing to do in watercolor, make some black paintings. Give it a try. You might just find a new way to use that color that some of us haven't thought of yet, or that makes your art all your own. By breaking the rules, we get to see what's truly possible and recognize that our art doesn't need to have any boundaries.